I'd like to thank Tree for running this competition, and especially I'd like to thank Claudia, who produced the book. I think she did a wonderful job. I like the quality of the paper, the graphics, and everything. And the judge, Matthew Tierney, who said all those nice things about me. I would also like to thank my husband, who on December 28th last year said, "Have you got your manuscript into the Tree competition? Because if you're not submitting, I will." Now, I'm not competitive. Much, but I do like to win. So thank you, Colin, for making me send that in. I actually started writing poetry about 6 or 7 years ago when I retired from the Federal Public Service. Before that, in my spare time, I wrote novels. But it seemed like when I quit work and didn't have that kind of pressure hanging over me, I was able to free up my mind to return to the kind of writing that I did first, which was poetry. And in putting this manuscript together, I had some trouble coming up with a title. I finally settled on Winter Music because the first 7 or 8 poems are the first ones that I ever wrote when I went back to poetry. And I thought, what do poets write about? The weather. So I set out to write a series of poems, something similar to the kind of journal entries that I've been keeping for years, only I specifically wanted them to be about winter. And I chose the best winter available, which was 2007, 2008, when we had 14 feet of snow. So this sequence starts in December and ends in March. And here's what it sounds like at about poem number 5, After Valentine. February is the longest month, measured in size. A squirrel crosses fresh snow on a neighbor's roof, swims with 4 splayed feet, sculls with its tail. Its tracks look like a monster breaking into the tool shed to hone its claws. We have sacrificed to the water gods, 3 snowmobilers through the ice in the Halliburton Highlands, 2 college students in a van near Barry's Bay. Thin ice whispers a promise of shortcuts, cuts short young lives. Can it end now? No, says winter. Water drips through the skylight. We climb out the window, shovel ice from the roof, go in and bask in the new view of sky, deep blue with outer space behind it. Of course, the other part of the title, Winter Music, is music. And the music, I find, seems to come in a lot of different poems. There are either references to music or snatches of song, and some of them are just flat out about music. But one of the things we discovered after that winter was a better way to cope with the weather, and that is to go to Cuba. So this poem was written on our second trip to Cuba. It's called 2 Resorts. On a boulder on the beach at Guadalajara, Christopher Columbus left his feet when his statue toppled and flew east during the last hurricane. The sign Hotel Talantico overlooks the bare rock, a giant A soaring after Columbus. Each day a maid changes our transparent sheets, folds threadbare towels into swans or hearts decorated with hibiscus flowers that make us sneeze. Canadians here sing of ice and snow and swim up to the bar for pina coladas. One dons snorkel gear to splash in the fountain. Quiet in our room, we surf the TV channels, Chinese Agricultural Report, Weather in German, Trailer Park Boys, BBC News. Farther down the beach at Guantanamo, another Canadian would like to hang the Por favor no moleste sign on his door. 6 years at Guantanamo, Omar has breathed this sea air, watched these dancing palm trees, contemplated stars and moon embedded in a sky so dark and clear a true sailor could navigate by night. Now, that's one of the themes that I get into in several poems in here, is sort of current affairs. I'm going to let that one stand for all of them. Another poem that has a reference to music in it is one in a sequence that I wrote. I called these the rude replies. And they're in your dreams, take a picture, it'll last longer, you wish, as if, good luck, and various things. The idea was that I wanted to take these little verbal nuggets that people normally use to stop conversation. I wanted to break them open and see what was in them. And I actually found it a very interesting exercise. There's several from that sequence in this chapbook, but I will read you in your dreams. You soar over rooftops, run light-footed across the park, bicycle down flowery lanes. You drove before you had a license or a lesson and didn't worry when road became sky beneath the wheels. Your son is always 6 and sweet in your dreams, your mother always young and smiling. Here you sing all the verses of borderland ballads in a clear voice that never cracks. Last night there were 4 Marys, tonight there'll be but 3. You talk to the dead and the missing in your dreams. Ask them, why did you leave me? You hope to sleep long enough to hear the answer. And in that same sequence is, it's your funeral. It's your funeral, we say, but it's not. Funerals are for the living. Janny and her brothers and sisters packed their father's ashes in shotgun shells and fired them into the wilderness west of Rocky Mountain House. Nigel and his sisters asked the crew for a broom to sweep their mother's ashes from the deck of the Vancouver Victoria ferry when the wind shifted while scattering. No one asked the ashes. What they wanted no longer signified. At your funeral, we'll stand around and say, too bad the old guy let it slip away. You say you'll go out feet first, and probably will, house proud again, but now of rotting shingles, sagging steps, lapsed insurance, green shag carpet, these things you're dying to keep. The house sags around you and with you. Each time we visit, you rehearse your funeral plans. You've told us how and where you want to be buried. Now tell us why. So there are quite a few poems dealing with family in there, but I also wrote a series of 3 poems for a friend of mine left my life. And I will just read Carol's words. She quizzes me on musical terms, mimes slentando, takes a giant step, her hand tracing the high arc and fall, slentando, a word never used in music, where retard and diminuendo say it all. She calls me Braggovich or braggadocio, garb or garbo, not for my famous silence, but because we both like words, backwards and forward. She writes to me that it all disasterizes, a word I've never seen anywhere except in her life. She says, chalk it up to experience. As if those moments will run in the rain like human outlines on a sidewalk, as if we're the ones doing the marking. We don't chalk experience. It tattoos us with designs we don't get to choose. Barbed wire around an arm, teardrops under each eye, someone else's initials. And I'm just going to close on a real downer, now that I've got you all sitting there looking. This one is called My Mother's Birds. I snipped the tail feathers off my grandmother's canary. My mother's memory reaches across the century to the flu epidemic, a small child sent away to a safer place. She finds the flower room, quilt blocks, sewing scissors too close to the cage, and tail feathers between the bars. That darn bird didn't sing until they grew back, and Grandma was mad at me the whole time. I remember other birds, ducks piled iridescent and smooth in our porch, cold and soft-necked, passive to pet. My mother plucked the feathers, snowstorms of down around her feet. She drew their guts into a pail, corrugated blue gizzards, purple livers, intestines like earthworms, her hand red nearly to the elbow. We ate roast duck and spat buckshot onto our plates. And at her graveside, more birds. A skein of geese flies toward the Chinook Arch. My brother says, honk if you like Rachel. And they do. They do.